Okay, let's get started. First of all, thank you so much to the South Florida Underwater Photography Society and especially to you, Lorraine, for contacting me for this webinar. It's really special for me to be able to share my photography and this, in particular, this little effect that I am using more oftenly these days since I won this year the underwater art category of the ocean art contest. So I don't know if you saw some of my images on social network, but the effect looks like this. I'm going to talk you about a plugin called Fractalius plugin developed by Redfield Plugins. It's a plugin that doesn't come with Photoshop. You have to purchase it and install it. I must say that I don't work for this company or I don't get any commission or anything. I am just a user of this plugin. And why it is called Fractalius? Because a fractal image, it is an image that it's created based on tiny single units that are repeated all around your image to create this effect. In this case, as you can see, the single units are glowing lines, and these glowing lines will be repeated all around. I'm going to try to show some other picture. The lines will be repeated all around. For example, this will be the single unit. This will be repeated to create the fractal image. And it is based on the highlights and the darker areas of the image. So it will convert the highlights into these fractal units. So let's go to Photoshop and start importing a picture to see how it works. If you go to Photoshop after installing the plugin, you will be able to see the plugin in the filters section, all down below in Redfield Fractalius. It will open the main Fractalius window with the last sets that you used. Now we are seeing the image with the last settings I was working today. And in this panel below, you have some sliders, and then we have two more panels, this on top left and this on top right. We are going to start checking the panel down below, especially this slider, the scale slider, because this slider is the one that is going to define how big are these single units, these lines, these fractals that will create your image. If you put it to 50, you will have the bigger and longer lines to work with. And if you set it to -50, you will shrink these lines and you will be basically working with dots instead of lines. So I usually like keeping this slider to the maximum because I like giving to my pictures this digitalized look with slender lines, and instead of dots I prefer to have longer lines. The other slider that is important is the mix slider. This will mix your original image with the Fractalius image. If you leave it to 100, you will only see the fractal image. But if you decrease the slider, you will start mixing the original image with the fractal. I have seen some people using in a very nice way the mixing both effects, and it looks very nice. But so far I am only using this this look, I like the minimalistic look with only a few lines and anything of the original picture in the background. So I always keep it to, or normally to the 100 to maximum. And these other two sliders are easy, just brightness and saturation to increase light or decrease light, and to increase saturation of colors. Down below, we have the common undo and redo buttons. We also have a reset button to reset all the sliders to, to the default setting. And we have the preview button, so we can activate and deactivate to see how was our original image. And we also have these dice that it's kind of funny tool just to randomize all the settings and to see if you are lucky and you get something nice. Of course, I never use this because I like to direct the effect I want to get, not to do it at random. But if you are bored or you love gambling, maybe you can use it a little bit. So now let's go up to the main sliders. This panel on the left is basically the same panel on the right. As you can see, sharpness, line width, radius, diffusion, all the tools have two sliders. The sliders of the left will modify the primary lines of your image, and the sliders of the right will modify the secondary lines. This means that this will affect the main lines, the big ones, the ones that are giving the, the thicker lines. And the secondary lines will be the smaller and tiny lines, mainly the ones that you can see in the edges. So let's see how every single slider works. If we go to sharpness, this one is easy. It will increase the sharpness of the lines. This slider for the primary lines, the bigger ones, and this slider for the secondary lines. If we keep it to 0, we will blur the image because we are reducing the sharpness. As you can see, this image is now completely blurred. I like keeping this a little bit high, so we have this slender look of each lines. Line width, the second setting, will affect the thickness of each line. If we increase the primary lines, we will get thicker lines, as you can see. And if we increase the line width of the secondary lines, we will be increasing the thickness of the small lines, okay? You cannot really notice here in the main window because you cannot zoom in, but I'm going to show you this exported image so we can zoom in. As you can see, there are places in the image that are full of tiny lines, and mainly this happens in important parts of the image, like the eye of the fish. If you increase the thickness or the line width of the secondary lines, you will give given thickness to all this cluster of small lines, and it will not look nice in the end, in my opinion. So I like keeping the line width of the secondary lines a little bit lower. The next tool is the radius. This will basically modify the shape of each individual line. The longer, well, the bigger the radius, the longer the lines. It's similar to the first scale slider that I mentioned, that you will be working with dots if you put it to -50, or working with lines if you put it to 50. So the radius is doing something similar. If I keep it to 0, we see that the lines are smaller, and if I increase it, the lines are longer. Again, as I like to have this minimalistic look with few lines and longer lines, I like keeping the radius to almost to the maximum all the time. The diffusion slider is more or less the opposite than the sharpness. If you increase diffusion, you will blur your image, but this slider works a little bit different. You can blur your image to the left if you move the slider to the left, or you can blur your image to the right. This is not really noticeable in this image, but I guess that for moving subjects, for example, it can be a good tool. But again, it is reducing the sharpness, and I normally don't use it because I like to keep in the sharp look. Now depth will increase the contrast of the between the highlights and the lowlights. So if you increase depth, you will get darker backgrounds and less lines because you are increasing a lot the contrast. I like increasing the depth in the secondary lines because in places like I mentioned before in the eye, you have clusters of a lot of lines. So increasing the depth, increasing the contrast in the secondary lines, you will be able to separate each individual line and to get a darker background between them. So you can see here the difference between a low depth and a high depth. In my opinion, it looks nicer with a darker background. And finally, the Scarify slider, what it's going to do is to divide each line into more lines. It will like cut the lines into more lines. So it's going to add more lines to your image. As you can see, if I increase it, the number of lines is increasing, and this is very noticeable for the secondary lines because it gives like a snowflake look in the edges of the image. I don't like too much this tool because it doesn't give this nice slender look. And we also have the noise slider that will modify both the primary and the secondary lines. That's why there is only one slider. And it's not exactly like the noise that we are used to in Lightroom or Photoshop, but it is also giving some sort of grain look to the image. If I increase it to the maximum, we will see that it's adding a little bit of grain and doing some strange effects. And this square here is to direct the position, the direction of the noise. You can have noise in the diagonal as it is now. We have increased noise in this direction, or you can increase the noise into the vertical direction. There you go. Again, a tool that I normally don't use, so I will keep it to 0. And I think like this image looks really nice. So if I want to keep it, I just need to click here in the green button. I will not do it because it takes ages to save the image in my laptop. So I will just show you some more other examples. But before going into another picture, it is very important to mention that we have presets to work with. and that you can save your own presets. Let's say that I want to keep this preset for later to import my image and not to lose all the work we have done. So I can open this menu and click in Save User Preset. You give it a name and then you save it, and it will appear in this drop-down menu on the top, Save on the top. I have here my own presets, fish portrait, jumping spider, whatever. I from the already provided presets, I really like to start with the glow 100 because it's giving this nice look, but a little bit blur. So I started working with the glow 100 preset when I started with the plugin, and increasing sharpness, reducing diffusion to try to get the more slender look, and it's a nice setting. Of course, this is only the way I work with the program. You can get so many different effects, and you can apply this in your own way. This is a plugin to create artistic looks on your underwater photography, so everything is valid, of course. Let's see some other how it looks with some other images. I normally work with fish portraits because they have nice patterns. You can see the scales, they have lines, white lines, black lines, they have colorful parts, not so colorful parts, and this will add a lot of nice lines in the effect. For example, if we use the picture of this mantis shrimp that has been kindly donated by Magali Marquez. This is her Instagram. I just saw a couple of days ago her picture of the mantis shrimp, and I thought, oh wow, this is going to look nice with a Fractalius. And she provided me with a picture. So let's see how it looks. I would say that this is a nice subject because it has a nice dark background. It has a colorful pattern with dark parts, with shiny parts. So this is a win-win photography for sure for to use with the Fractalius filter. As you can see, it's nice. You can also use some other images like nudibranchs or jellyfishes. Let's see how it looks with this nudibranch. I have seen some people doing Fractalius with wide angle photography, and I don't really like those ones because in wide angle photography there is a lot of information, and the image is saturated with lines everywhere, and you cannot really focus on anything. And although, for example, the image of the nudibranch looks cool, it's nice because okay, the shape is nice. I don't really like it that much because I like when using the Fractalius to recognize the subject. This could be anything right now. Okay, it's a very cool anything, but I cannot see that it's a nudibranch. It could be a hairball. It's strange. So I prefer using the filter with subjects that you can recognize. Good. So as you saw in my first image, this one, this is not the original image. I have crazily increased contrast and saturation on the image that it doesn't look really nice like this as an underwater image. But I did this because I was preparing the image to work with the Fractal plugin, because I know how it's going to look after using it. And this is, I think, essential to get nice results in the end, and not to get frustrated when you use the plugin. For example, I have here this shark picture that that Lorraine kindly provided. It's an amazing shark picture. But if I use directly the picture, the filter on the picture without any previous edits, okay, it's going to look like this. Okay, looks cool, but it doesn't have the look that I like. For example, here in the edges, it has an oversaturation of lines because the highlights in the in the edges of the shark are very high. We also don't have a nice dark background. We have a lot of lines here on the top that may take attention. We have also lost the tail of the shark because it is a little bit underexposed in comparison with the body of the shark. And if we work here with the sliders, we will never be able to fix all this all these lines, because they are already there and you cannot eliminate them. So if you know that the Fractalius plugin is going to create lines out of the highlights, what you can do is to control the highlights and to even modify them or paint them in Lightroom or Photoshop or whatever editing program you use before using the plugin. I have worked a little bit with the shark picture. I normally do my edits in Lightroom because I find it more easier than Photoshop. And I have been just this basically destroying the picture. I have been painting with the brush just to create a, a nice silhouette, a nice blue silhouette in the edges of the shark. It doesn't necessarily, when you darken the background, you don't need to go until the edge of the shark. As you see, I am keeping, I am not doing a nice dark background. I'm just keeping these blue edges because this in the Fractalius plugin will be converted into the glowing lines, and it will give the silhouette of the shark. So I'm not going to bore you here with Lightroom edits, but for example, what I got after playing a little bit with the image was, where it is, was this. I created the blue lines in the edges, in the silhouette. I increased the exposure in the tail, not to lose the tail when we apply the filter. I have decreased a little bit the highlights in the body of the shark. I have also painted the mouth and the nostrils of the shark, because these are interesting and parts that will help you to identify the image. Of course, you are going to identify the shark silhouette, but for example, if you clearly see the mouth and the nostrils, you will be able to tell that it is facing up or down. And I have also played around with the sun rays to try to create some digital sun rays. This is the first time I do this in a fractal image. So after preparing the picture now for the Fractalius plugin. If we go to the plugin, we will see that now it looks better. Now we don't have an oversaturation of lines in the edges. We can see the nostrils, the the body, the belly of the shark is not burnt. We can see the tail now of the shark. We have very sharp edges, creating this very nice silhouette, and we have also created this nice sun rays. So yeah, I think now I'm going just to show a couple of more examples to try to motivate you to do it. That, by the way, they have just opened the underwater art contest again to raise funds against the coronavirus. So you can try. I'm going to definitely apply with one more Fractalius image for sure, since I got this nice result. Uh, Look, for example, this chromis, this kind of damselfish of the Mediterranean Sea. I think it's going to look nice. Okay, my last edits, for example, doesn't work very nice with this one, so I'm going to try my basic preset. Now we can see a little bit more lines. As you can see, this fish, it's a fish with a clear pattern in the scales, and this is creating the lines in the filter in the when you apply the filter. I think it looks very nice. But for example, we have some noise in the background from this orange coral that it's back there, and we should have prepared, as I did with the shark picture, the background to have a nice dark background in the final edit. So, okay, now this is all from me. If you have any questions, I will be really happy to answer. And thank you so much again for attending, and to Lorraine for inviting me and giving me this great opportunity all the way from Spain.